I want to talk about Andrei Yarmak and the fact that right now he is in the fight of his life. For those of you who don't know, Andrei Yarmak has been known as the right hand of Zelensky. He's no longer his chief of staff, but he was his chief. And he was very, very, very influential in the country and still is very, very, very influential in the country. Probably one of the strongest men in the country. And you could say outside of Vladimir Zelensky, he might have been the second most powerful man in the country. But as Nabu and Sapu, which Zelensky tried to eliminate the independence of before reversing course after protests went past military curfew, and he wasn't able to stop the uproar and opposition, and so they allowed Nabu and Sapu, the anti-corruption independent organizations, to continue independently to pursue corruption. Many of the people ended up being those in Zelensky's orbit. Some of them fled the country, never to be seen again. Others, like Andrei Yarmak, waited to see if he could, I don't know, survive this in the long run. Either way, he is now seeing that the circle is closing in. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And now he is facing jail time, real jail time. The Ukrainian president's former right-hand man, Andrei Yarmak, has descended from power to courtroom, being implicated in a major corruption case. After a 3-day-long hearing on May 14th, the High Anti-Corruption Court placed Yarmak in custody for 2 months. When they say custody for 2 months, you know another word that is? Jail. For 2 months, and set his bail at $3.1 million. At least for the time being, Yarmak will spend his time behind bars. I don't have that kind of money for bail. Right now, my lawyer will be working with friends and acquaintances. I deny any accusations. I have nothing to hide. I will file an appeal. Investigators allege that more than 460 million hryvnia, or $8.9 million, were laundered between 2021 and 2025 through the construction of an elite cottage complex in the village of Kozin, a wealthy enclave south of the capital. According to the prosecution, the funds for the lavish construction project were generated via the multi-million-dollar construction scheme centered around the state nuclear monopoly Energom. I'm sorry, I've never been good at pronouncing it. Energotum. Ugh, never good at pronouncing it. Somebody's going to have to help me that, a Ukrainian. But essentially, this is part of a wider corruption scandal that broke last year. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, alleges that 10 to 15% of kickbacks were collected by high-ranking officials from the contractors in exchange for keeping their status as suppliers and for not blocking their products and services. One of the 4 houses financed through the corruption scheme was allegedly met for Yarmak. He charged on May 11th with money laundering tied to the construction. If convicted, Yarmak could face up to 12 years in jail. 6 more people were charged in the same case. Prosecutors said Yarmak was identified in some chats by the code names R2, AB, and LL. She added that an Excel spreadsheet found on an architect's phone listed meetings related to the construction. Next to R2, investigators found the initials AB, which said referred to Andrei Borisovich, Yarmak's name, and Petromenik. Yarmak and his lawyer denied wrongdoing, calling the charges unfounded and 95% assumptions. They said anti-corruption agencies had been subject to public pressure to bring charges against Yarmak. We heard many names and nicknames from the respected representatives of the prosecution. I want to say I have only one name, Andrei Yarmak. Alexei Hurin, politics professor at Kiev Academy, research advisor at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation, says the charges against Yarmak came as no surprise, as such a scenario had been widely discussed in recent months. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office were doing their work in collecting evidence, so this development appears to be a natural outcome. What is striking is not the corruption itself. We at least suspected it existed at the top, but the cynicism. Yarmak's fall from grace began in July with the attacks against the anti-corruption institutions investigating theft in high cabinets. The move sparked mass protests and was later reversed under pressure from the streets and calls from Brussels. The report suggests Yarmak orchestrated that effort. This is a lie, Yarmak told journalists in court. Though considered one of the best connected power brokers, Yarmak was alone in court. No ally stepped forward to defend him. Over the years, reports alleged that Yarmak wielded influence across all branches of the government and played a key role in major appointments. Lawmakers who spoke to the Kiev Independent described him as a boogeyman, saying his departure made it easier to breathe. On the second day of the hearing, controversial activist Imran Kant came as the sole supporter of Yarmak, bringing an icon depicting Jesus. Yarmak quietly took it and placed it beside him. The prosecution portrayed Yarmak as someone who took an interest in the supernatural. So, when they say that, what they mean is that he was listening to a fortune teller in order to make high-profile decisions. A fortune teller that told him to go after his enemies in the media before it is too late. The prosecutor alleged he corresponded with a contact named Veronica Feng Shui office about government appointments, sending her candidates' birth dates. The journalist identified her as Veronica, a 51-year-old astrologer from Kiev. According to Sapu, since at least 2020, Yarmak had consulted her on appointments, including those of the Deputy President's office head, Olena Tatarov, Health Minister Viktor Lushenko, and former Prosecutor General Ayana, now ambassador to Liechtenstein and Switzerland. In the late 2025, during a search in a car of Yarmak's driver, investigators found these documents titled SBU Ukraine Maximum Program. According to the prosecutor, the papers outlined a planned appointments within the security services of the SBU, some of which are still in place. Yarmak denied the allegations. I never wore a crown. If I called someone or spoke to them, I did so directly. I always addressed matters of state interest, not private issues. If someone is impersonating me, report it immediately to law enforcement. I know a few Veronicas. I have a lot of acquaintances. I definitely did not communicate with fortune tellers, just as I never had voodoo dolls. Now look, Yarmak has been an extremely notorious figure in Ukrainian politics. He is widely despised. He was egged as he was going in and out of the court, which was shared widely on social media, and he is seen as a bastion of corruption and as a bad influence on Zelensky, and one with extremely outsized influence as the main power broker in Zelensky's administration before his removal from the chief of staff position. He then continued to wield power from outside of that chief of staff position before eventually he has to face down the corruption charges that I think probably have substantial evidence. And I mean, have substantial evidence. They have the documents. Yarmak is in his weakest position yet. But this is less about Yarmak as an individual when I discuss this, and this is more institutional. The way this is being talked about in Russia is as a propaganda piece. Look how corrupt the Ukrainians are. This is what we are trying to conquer and destroy. And those who are against supporting Ukraine say, look how corrupt Ukraine is. Is this what you want to give weapons to? Now, I would say that a kickback scheme with a local Ukrainian service provider is about as Ukrainian corruption it can get. This is how corruption in Ukraine broadly works. It's not the only example of corruption. You can show other examples from the Poroshenko government or otherwise, but this is the main example. You either have some shell company or some kickback scheme to either funnel money off through the shell company or to take a portion of the funds and give it to those that gave you the contract in the first place. So this is a very common type of corruption in Ukraine, which makes the story only that much more believable. But I want to respond to these two ways of thinking. Number one, the American anti-Ukraine way of thinking. This type of corruption is why we shouldn't support Ukraine. Number one, we have a huge corruption problem in the United States right now from our White House. If we were invaded, I would still want other countries' support to protect our freedom and to protect our country. And in Ukraine's case, this type of corruption has nothing to do with defense armaments. This type of corruption has to do with domestic Ukrainian energy providers and a kickback scheme from those energy providers. So it's not like he's selling an Abrams tank or he's selling 155 artillery ammunition, or he's selling Pac 2 or Pac 3 interceptors. This is him selling kickbacks and contracts, which is, I mean, that is Ukrainian corruption. So I want to put that forward. On the other side, from the Russian side, the corruption in Russia is still happening. It's just that if you're in the inner circle of Putin, you're not going to get challenged by an independent anti-corruption agency like NAPU and SAPU, because nothing like that exists in the United States. In fact, right now, I would argue that something like that doesn't, oh wait, I said United States. That's a Freudian slip. It's true. It doesn't exist in the United States as well, though, sadly. It also does not exist in the Russian Federation. If corruption is an issue in Ukraine, it isn't the type of issue that just goes away because you snap your fingers or you do the anti-corruption dance. You have to prosecute people. You have to make examples out of people. And out of any person on the planet to make an example of, Yarmak is the best example to make an example of. If you can throw Yarmak in prison, if you can fine him, if you can actually throw 12 years in prison at this man, and you can hold him accountable to it, what type of signal does this send to anyone else in Ukraine wanting to engage in corruption? Well, if Yarmak isn't even safe, if the independence of these organizations is so strong that the president of Ukraine had to dismiss him as his chief of staff, as the noose continued to tighten around Yarmak until eventually he is in custody, he has a $3.1 million worth of bail attached to his name, and he's facing 12 years in prison, well, certainly, you as Joe Schmo corruption trying to take a bribe, you could be thrown in prison as well. And so this is something that could really be like a tide shift when it comes to combating Ukrainian corruption. Not because Yarmak has been particularly bad when it comes to corruption, even though he has been bad. It's more about the influence that he has. This is about the power that goes with him, and the fact that no matter the influence, no matter the money, no matter the ties, no matter even a relationship with the president of Ukraine who favors him heavily, that was still not enough to fight against NABU and SAPU and these independent anti-corruption agencies. These organizations and their independence are, I'm not going to say single-handedly, because anti-corruption activists in Ukraine deserve a ton of credit. Ukrainian civil society deserves maximum credit. But these organizations that were built and advocated for by Ukrainian civil society, they are trudging forward on the path of purging corruption from Ukrainian society. Corruption is corrosive, and in a war of national survival, it is also deadly. Yarmak, if made an example of, will be a positive step forward for the crusade against corruption, and will be a positive step forward in intimidating those who are corrupt to hide and stop. And potential people who are thinking about participating, thinking, well, don't want to end up like Andrei Yarmak, hated by the country and in a cell. Okay. Next story.